Look, it's one thing to sort of say that you respect your adversary, but Mike Pompeo, I think, over-egged the pudding a little too much there. I believe that was in an interview with the National Interest, an organization that has had a kind of interesting relationship with Russia, by the way, also picked up on Russian state television. The irony of all this, the war party that Putin has now surrounded himself with, they believe that this is the time to spoil for a confrontation with the West because they think the West is in terminal decline. People who think that by flattering Vladimir Putin, by going on talk shows and primetime television shows and basically saying, well, Putin never ate a dog, why should we pick a fight with him? They think that this is somehow going to be met with respect and admiration on the part of Russian strongmen. No. Useful idiots are just that. They're seen as convenient until they're seen as expendable. They are held in contempt by the people in Moscow right now who are plotting this strategy, right? I mean, Stalin used to refer to the Communist International as the gyp joint, and then he took all these fellow travelers cooling their heels in Moscow in the 1930s and sent them to the Gulag. That's how they treat people who flatter them, okay? So I think it's really important to emphasize that this sort of trope in American politics coming from the far right, also parts of the far left, only feed into Moscow's grand strategy here.
It's so sad. It's just so sad that people would praise a guy who murders people internationally, not even on his own soil, which would be gross enough, which would be, you know, murder, no matter how you sliced it, from a dictator, okay, a murderous dictator. But he does it all over the world. And there are people in high positions who served this nation in everything from the State Department as the Secretary of State all the way up to the presidency, who are praising a man who is a murderer, praising him and telling their audience that's what strength is. It's taking of innocent life with polonium, or throwing people out windows, or mafia hit squads, or smearing Novichok on doorknobs of people that you find inconvenient in London. I mean, the Skripal family, do you remember that? I mean, this is madness. This is crazy. When America actually loses its character of being good people and starts to admire a brute murder as being strength, we're so screwed. And they're playing it on Russian state TV. They're playing our television on their television. So Russians can sit there and point and laugh and go, America is so gone. Let's just take them. Let's just take them out. They're gone. They couldn't possibly defend themselves. Look how divided they are. Look at the country. We were so good with our propaganda. We were so good with our lies. We not only got a president elected who had no business being near anything with power, including a freaking television set that plugs into the wall. That's too much power for that man to be around. But we gave him the presidency. We gave him nuclear weapons. We gave him the awesome power of the banking system. We gave him the awesome power to move markets. Oh my God. Wake up. All right. So here's my solution. Now, you can mull this over. I'm not saying this is the last thought I'll give it, but this is the thought that's been rolling around my giant brain. So the bull crap story we're being told, and it is a bull crap story. The bull crap story that we're being told is this is all about Ukraine wanting to join NATO, and that would be threatening to Vlad. You can't have a NATO country on the border of Russia, although Estonia is on the border of Russia. Poland is on the border of Russia. Latvia, Lithuania, they're on the border of Russia. They're NATO countries. Okay, just saying. So you know that is just bull crap. All right. But there is some truth to this portion of the NATO story. So let's just tell it to you real quick so you have it in your head and it's in your arsenal what happened with NATO. So back in, the day when John McCain was still alive, by the way. So the Republicans started talking about, hey, let's consider, they started to expand NATO to include allies, in Europe and allow countries like Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania to join NATO. Now, Putin didn't have any issue with it, but when they started talking about this little tiny country called Georgia, which is south, okay, the countries I just named are on the western portion of Russia. Look at the map of Russia. It's huge. But down south there, you'll see this little country called Georgia. So we, as a country, the Republicans, started talking about getting Georgia and Ukraine admitted to NATO. And when Vlad heard this, he literally popped a gasket and said, oh, hell no, and invaded Georgia as punishment for them even discussing it. Same thing with Ukraine and Crimea. That was all as a result of even talking about Ukraine being included in NATO. That's the only portion of this current contretemps that is true about Ukraine and NATO. Okay? So here's my solution. Admit Ukraine to NATO. Like right now. Like tomorrow. Like today. Do it. Do it. Put Ukraine into NATO. Now, who makes that happen? NATO does. The NATO countries do. Have a vote right freaking now and admit Ukraine into NATO. Why? Because then if Vlad puts a toe, just a toenail, into Ukraine, Article 5 kicks in, and now Vlad is not fighting Ukraine, and the Ukrainian citizens who would do most of the fighting and would do it. They would. If you don't understand the determination of a Ukrainian who is very, very, very pro-Ukraine, very pro their country. They've lived with Russia on their border for years. They've lived with threats from him. They've lived with the Confederacy and the separatists and the terrorism and all that comes with separation and secessionists. That's why I explained it to you through an American idea of the South and the Civil War and secessionists, okay? Because that's what's going on in eastern Ukraine. All right, so they've lived with that this whole time. This whole time they've lived with that. They are determined to keep their country. They love their country. They will fight for every inch of their country. And I'm talking about 50-year-old graphic designers. I'm talking about school marms. Okay. You know, it's really interesting. I don't know. For those of you who know my maiden last name, my real last name, the woman who ran that kindergarten has my last name. It gave me chills when I saw an interview with her. Her name's Natalia Butenko. Anyway, they will fight. They will fight. There's no question they will fight. But why should they have to do it alone? If he invades Ukraine, have a vote like right then, right there. And now he has to fight all of NATO. Now he has to fight France and the UK and Poland and everyone in NATO. Everyone. What do you think of that?